見切りました。
角のカラスが
法の裁きを受けてこい。武器を捨てろ。
運命の変わり目、気をつけて。
やっ、ここより弱滅の時。ふっ、てっ、しっ、たっ、せっ、ふっ、てっ、たっ、せっ。逃げ道はあります。
夜の権限。
投降しろ。動くな。最後の警告だ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
稲光、すなわち永遠なり裁きの雷。てっ、ふっ、てっ、せっ、はっ、てっ、
影のカラスが
これは必要な武力だ。動くな。
腐食、神聖、気をつけて。
ここより弱滅の時。ふっ、やっ、逃げ道はありません。投降しろ。武器を捨てろ。動くな。武器を。
腐食、神聖、任せて。
夜の源源。
無我の境地。ふっ、せっ、ふっ、せっ。やっ、見切りました。
姿を見せ。
これは必要な武力だ。動くな。最後の警告だ。
運命の変わり目、気をつけて。
夜の権限。
稲光、すなわち永遠なり。はっ、てっ、ふっ、逃げ道は。投降しろ。動くな。最後の警告だ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
黒き翼よ。
ここより弱滅の時。裁きの雷。たっ、ふっ、てっ、はっ、ふっ。法の裁きを受けてこい。
断罪の
運命の変わり目、危ない。
稲光、すなわち永遠なり。
みんながそばに。
雷のごとく愛
聞け、太陽の本能と。
名を照らす炎よ。闇を滅せよ。ヒーロー剣山。ドーンジャスティス。頭突き。超必殺ハンマー。ドーン
くらえ。
もっと早く。もっと
みんなは俺が。
石煙に葬られよ。
ドーン超必殺ハンマー。行くよ。ジャスティス。超必殺ハンマー。ドーン
全力攻撃だ。せっ、
カウント。
燃え、この天下で裁く。
ドーンジャスティス。そうやダイビングヒープ。
夜の源源。
投降しろ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
ここより弱滅の時。てっ、ふっ、てっ、せっ、てっ。見切りました。
夜の権限。
法の裁きを受けてこい。
運命の変わり目、任せて。
無我の境地。ふっ、たっ、てっ、ふっ、ふっ、はっ、てっ、ひゅっ、せっ。裁きの雷。
黒き翼よ。
投降しろ。最後の警告だ。武器を捨て。
腐食、神聖、
稲光、すなわち永遠なり。見切りました。たっ、ふん、ふん、てっ、はっ、
夜の権限。
これは必要な武力だ。
運命の変わり目、任せて。
ここより弱滅の時。せっ、ふん、せっ。逃げ道はあります。 法の裁きを受けてこい。武器を
影のカラスが
運命の変わり目。
答えなさい。
無我の境地。やっふっふっせっはっせっ裁きの雷。これは必要な武力だ。
夜の権限値。
運命の変わり目。危ない。
ここより弱滅の時。せっせっはっふっはっせっ
夜の元
最後の警告だ。法の裁き。
腐食神聖。危ない。
稲光すなわち永遠なり。せっやっせっひゅっ
影のカラスが優也を求め。
これは必要な武力だ。武器を捨てろ。動くな。
運命の変わり目。任せて。
ここより弱滅の時。逃げ道はありません。しっはっやった。投降しろ。最後の警告。
お嬢様の仰せの
運命の変わり目。気をつけて。
稲光すなわち永遠なり。ふっはっせっはっせっ裁きの意。これは
夜の元元。
腐食神聖。危ない。
ここより弱滅の時。やっひゅっふんせっはっ逃げ道はありません。しっはっ
お嬢様の仰せのままに。
法の裁きを受けて。
腐食神聖。気をつけて。
無我の境地。せっせっふっせっふっしっせっ裁きの雷。
黒き翼よ昼夜を切。
これは必要な武力だ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。危ない。
稲光すなわち永遠なり。ふっせっやっせっはっふっ逃げ道はありません。
夜の権限。
法の裁きを受けてこ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
ここより弱滅の時。せっひゅっ見切りました。せっせっせっせっ
夜の元元。
これは必要な武力だ。武器を
腐食神聖。
無我の境地。ふっはっせっ裁きの雷。
影のカラスが優也を求め。
法の裁きを受けてこい。動くな。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。危ない。
稲光すなわち永遠なり。ふっせっやっふっ見切りました。
夜の源源。
これは必要な武力だ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
無我の境地。はっふっふっはっふったっふっやっせっ
お嬢様の仰せのままに。
法の裁きを受けて。
腐食神聖。
裁きの雷稲光すなわち永遠なり。ふっはっ逃げ道はあります。投降し角もからす。
物語は始まった。みんながそばに。
呼吸を整えよう。
烈日よ私に従え。
突撃くらえかわっはーいくよ。大火弾おろしくらえ。
みんなは俺が。
イカズチのごとく動け。
燃えよこの天下で裁く。
かわっジャスティスかわっとジャスティスくらっ。
みんながそばに。
もっと早くもっと
烈日よ私に従え。
頭突きは突撃ドーン。
法の夜の権限。最後の警告。
運命の変わり目。気をつけて。
ここより弱滅の時。たっふっふっふっふっやっ裁きの雷。これは必要な武力だ。
夜の源源。
運命の変わり目。任せて。
無我の境地。ひゅっはっふっせっふったっせっやっふっ
黒き翼よ注意。
法の裁きを受けてこい。
腐食神聖。任せて。
稲光すなわち永遠なり。見切りました。せっせっせっせっ
お嬢様の仰せのまま。
投降しろ。
運命の変わり目。
ここより弱滅の時。逃げ道はありません。ふっせっはっさっせっ
夜の源源。
法の裁きを受けてこい。
運命の変わり目。気をつけて。
無我の境地。ふっせっはっふっせっ見切りました。
影の辛さが優也。
これは必要な武力です。
運命の変わり目。任せて。
ここより弱滅の時。はっふっやっせっせっふっ法の裁きを受けて。
お嬢様の仰せのままに。
任せて。腐食神聖。
逃げ道はありません。無我の境地。ヒュッせっ裁きの怒り。
夜の権限。
投降しろ。武器を捨てろ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
危ない。ここより弱滅の時。せっはっふっしっせっ見切りました。これは必要な武力。ヒュッシッ
お嬢様の仰せの
法の裁きを受けて。
腐食神聖気をつけて。
無我の境地。てっはっふっやってっふってっ
夜の権限。
これは必要な武力だ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
危ない。稲光すなわち永遠なり。逃げ道はありません。はっふってっふってっ裁きの一。
お嬢様の仰せのままに
投降しろ。
腐食神聖
危ない。ここより弱滅の時。見切りました。ふっやってせっはっふっ
夜の権限。
法の裁き。武器を捨てろ。
腐食神聖
危ない。稲光すなわち永遠なり。はっふっふっふっふっしっ
黒き翼よ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。気をつけて。
お嬢様の仰せのままに
これは必要な武力だ。ここより弱滅の時。てっせっふっせったっふっふっしっ裁きの怒り。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
投降しろ。動くな。
影のカラスが。
無我の境地。見切りました。せっせっせっせっひゅっはっ法の裁きを受けてこい。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。任せて。
お嬢様の仰せのままに
ここより弱滅の時。たっせっ
運命の変わり目任せて。
これは必要な武力だ。
夜の権限。
無我の境地。ふっふっせっふっせっやっ
運命の変わり目。
法の
影のカラスが優也を。
逃げ道はありません。ここより弱滅の時。 見切りました。これは必要な武力だ。
腐食神聖
無我の境地。法の裁きを受けてこい。
腐食神聖気をつけて。
夜の権限。
ここより弱滅の時。逃げ道はありません。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。任せて。
裁きの怒り。
お嬢様の
投降しろ。
腐食神聖危ない。
無我の境地。見切りました。法の裁きを受けてこい。
夜の権限。
運命の変わり目気をつけて。
稲光すなわち永遠なり。
お嬢様の仰せのままに。
これは必要な武力だ。
腐食神聖
ここより弱滅の時。
過度なカラスが優也を求めている。
法の裁きを受け。
運命の変わり目。
無我の境地。
夜の権限。
これは必要な武力だ。
運命の変わり目任せて。
逃げ道はありません。ここより弱滅の時。見切りました。法の裁きを受け。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
夜の権
稲光すなわち永遠なり。逃げ道はあります。これは必要な武力だ。
腐食神聖
夜の権限。
無我の境地。法の裁きを受けてこい。
お嬢様。
腐食神聖危ない。
見切りました。稲光すなわち永遠なり。
全力攻撃。
雷のごとく
この天下で裁く。
突撃。ドーン行くよ。突撃。ドーン頭突き。ヒーロー剣山。タッ
みんながそばに。
呼吸を整えよう。愛
石煙に葬られよ。
ドーン大火弾おろし。頭突き。ジャスティス。
みんなは俺が守れ。
雷のごとく動け。
燃えよこの天下で裁く。
突撃。頭突き。
ひゅっ逃げ道はあります。
みんながそばに。
夜の剣
運命の変わり目。任せて。
無我の境地てっふっやっふっせってったせ
任せて。運命の変わり目。みんなは俺が守れ。くらえ。
影のカラスが優也を求めている。
裁きの雷ここより弱滅の時ふっやってっせふっふっ逃げ道はありません。
みんながそばに。
夜の源源。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。危ない。
稲光すなわち永遠なりやっせてひゅっせふっ
みんなは俺が。
影のカラスが優也を。
運命の変わり目。
ここより弱滅の時ふっふっふっせふっ見切りました。はって
全力攻撃だ。もう任せて。腐食神聖。
お嬢様の仰せのままに。
稲光すなわち永遠なり逃げ道はありません。ふっせふっ
みんなは俺が腐食神聖。
黒き翼よ。
見切りました。無我の境地たふっせてた逃げ道はありません。
みんながそばに。腐食神聖。任せて。
夜の源源。
稲光すなわち永遠なりてせはっ裁きの雷
みんなは俺が。物語は始まったば。
影のカラスが優也を求めている。
見切りました。ここより弱滅の時はっせたてふっ逃げ道はあります。
全力攻撃。
お嬢様の仰せのままに。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。
稲光すなわち永遠なりふってせたふって見切りました。裁きのこれは必要な武力だ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。危ない。
黒き翼よ。昼夜を切り裂く。
無我の境地見切りました。せやっふっせはい投降しろ。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。気をつけて。
お嬢様の仰せのままに。
逃げ道はありません。稲光すなわち永遠なりはっせふっはっやっ見切りました。法の裁きを受けてこい。
運命の変わり目。任せて。
夜の源源。
無我の境地逃げ道はありません。投降しろ。武器を
姿を見せ。
運命の変わり目。
お嬢様の仰せの。
稲光すなわち永遠なり見切りました。せふったこれは必要な武力だ。
物語は 始まったばかりだよ。任せ。
影のカラスが言う。
ここより弱滅の時、逃げ道はありません。しっ、てっ、せっ、ふっ、はっ。法の裁きを受け。
物語は始まったばかりだよ。危ない。
お嬢様の
見切りました。稲光、すなわち永遠なり。ひゅっ、てっ、てっ、はっ、てっ、ふっ、てっ、はっ、てっ。投降しろ。動くな。
腐食、神聖。危ない。
影のカラスが優也を。
逃げ道はありません。ここより弱滅の時。てっ、せっ、ふっ、てっ、せっ。法の裁きを受けてこい。
運命の変わり目。任せて。
夜の源源。
無我の境地。はっ、てっ、はっ、てっ、ふっ、てっ、ふっ、てっ、ひゅっ、ふっ、ふっ。
みんなは俺が。
合図を。
烈日、私に従え。
さあ行くよ。突撃。くらえ。ドーン。突撃。
みんながそばに。
もっと早く、もっと強く。カウント。
頭上を焼き尽くすこの天下で。
追い花壇おろし。ドーン。行くよ。ドーン。
みんなは俺が。
呼吸を整えよう。もっと早く走れ。
烈日、私に従え。
続き。はーっ。ドーン。ドーン。はーっ。はーっ。えい。はーっ。
裁きの雷、新旧任務、投降しろ。動くな。
夜の権限。
腐食、神聖。危ない。
ここより弱滅の時、逃げ道はありません。てっ、ふっ、てっ、はっ、ふっ、ふっ。法の裁きを受けてこい。
お嬢様の仰せの
物語は始まったばかりだよ。任せて。
裁きの雷、無我の境地。てっ、てっ、ふっ、てっ、ふっ、てっ、はっ。見切りました。投降し。
夜の源源。
運命の変わり目。危ない。
稲光、すなわち永遠なり。てっ、てっ、ふっ、ふっ、ふっ。さあ、逃げ道はありません。法の裁きを受ける。
夜の権限。
運命の変わり目。危ない。
よっ、てっ、無我の境地。はっ、てっ、てっ。
全力攻撃。
よく見とけ。合図を。
石煙に葬られよ。アクセル。
はーっ。タッドーン。ジャスティス。頭突き。ジャスティス。タッ。
くらえ。みんなは俺が。
はーっ。カウント。
引け。太陽の炎を止める。
ドーン。ヒーロー剣山。くらえ。頭突き。ジャスティス。ドーン。
みんながそば。
雷のごとく。動け。
石煙に葬られよ。
行くよ。ジャスティス。さあ頭突き。突撃。
裁きの雷、
運命の変わり目。任せて。
これは必要な武力だ。
夜の源源。
ここより弱滅の時。法の裁きを受けてこい。動くな。
腐食神聖
夜の
見切りました。稲光すなわち永遠なり。やっはっ逃げ道はあり。これは必要な武力だ。武器を捨てろ。最後の警告だ。
運命の変わり目。危ない。
影も枯らす。
ここより弱滅の時。投降しろ。
断罪の名において
運命の変わり目。気をつけて。
見切りました。無我の境地。これは必要な武力だ。武器を捨てろ。最後の
影も枯らす。
腐食神聖任せて。
逃げ道はありません。ここ
全力攻撃。
カウント。
引け太陽の方向を。
ヒーロー決断。行くよ。ヒーロー決断。ドーン突撃。ドーン
よし。
頭突き。もっと早く。もっと。
みんなは俺が。
炎も決して消えない。
お嬢様の仰せの
法の裁きを受けてこい。動くな。武器を捨て。
腐食神聖
裁きの意図。
腐食神聖。危ない。
これは必要な武力だ。動くな。武器を捨てろ。
影も枯らす。
見切りました。無我の境地。ヒュッやっ裁きの雷。
腐食神聖気をつけて。
法の裁きを受けて。
姿を見。
やっ
黒き翼よ。
稲光すなわち永遠なり。見切りました。
危ない。
これは必要な武力だ。最後の警告だ。動くな。
物語は始まったばかり。
夜の
裁きの雷。ここより弱滅の時。見切りました。投降しろ。最後の警告だ。
任せて。運命の変わり目。
夜の源源。
裁きの雷。稲光すなわち永遠なり。
みんながそばにいる。
呼吸を整えよう。
この天下で裁く。加速する。
はーい。行くよ。ヒーロー決断。ドーンはっヒーロー決断。
燃えろ。全力こ。
引け合図を。
燃え赤煙に葬られ。
頭突き。突撃。くらえ。行くよ。ジャスティス。
みんなは俺が。
もっと早く。もっと強く動け。
烈日私に従え。
頭突き。はーい。ドーンたっ
ひゅっとっと
cooldown. So if we can get Mavuika to actually have a less than 15-second cooldown and she can fit comfortably on this team, she actually should be a sizable upgrade for this team versus Xiangling. Should bring Raiden's overall value compared to other DPSs up a little bit, both from just hopefully having an upgraded character as well.
任せて。運命の変わり目。
動くな
黒き翼よ
無我の境地てふっよってたせふって法の裁きを受けてこい最後の警告
腐食神聖
夜の剣
愚か稲光すなわち永遠なり逃げ道はありません ひゅっはっはっ
well as the cooldown synergizing better with Raiden's kit, but hopefully having an upgraded character as well as the cooldown synergizing better with Raiden's kit.
Not like any are needed, but he does have some good ones that are worth covering. Firstly, for Durin's first constellation, this is one that has a very long wall of... Alright, now with all that out of the way, let's talk about Durin's best teams. Now firstly, to talk a bit about his synergies, let's start with the Hexarai characters and the new Hexarai resonance. As I mentioned earlier, thanks to the new Hexarai buffs to certain characters, if you do a very short quest for both Durin and whichever other Hexarai character you run in your party, the resonance will be active and you will gain some buffs to these characters. Now while I want to clarify that Durin doesn't need a Hexarai unit for all of his teams, because as a standalone unit, especially as a support with 20% res shred and good off-field pyro application and damage, Durin will fit in so many different teams as a standalone unit. With that said, a lot of his best teams, a decent chunk of them, will feature another Hexarai unit, namely either the DPSs where Durin is an excellent support, or the supports that are great units on their own, but now with Durin and the Hexarai buffs become much better. A great example of this is Fischl, who will be present in the vast majority of Durin Overload teams as a support who's great on her own, but thanks to the Hexarai buffs will now also give your team a big amount of attack percent and potentially elemental mastery if you're electrocharging, while also enabling Durin to get even more res shred and potentially having some additional Hexarai synergies with his signature weapon and maybe future characters or something like that. As of right now though, the Hexarai resonance basically just creates some strong pairings like Durin and Fischl in many teams, or Durin and Albedo as just a strong and newly buffed support, while also benefiting Durin himself, making a lot of his best teams feature another Hexarai unit, whereas there are still a lot of other teams that don't require one. Now, keep in mind that you do get to choose a free Hexarai unit thanks to the new kind of witch quest thing, where you can choose either Fischl, Sucrose, or Razor, which is appreciated when it comes to getting a character you don't have or increasing their constellation level. Now, with that covered, let's talk about Durin's actual team archetypes, where you can play them, and give you guys some example teams as well. So firstly, a very popular team for Durin is going to be Overload teams. These teams are going to comprise of Durin, an Electro support, which is almost always going to be Fischl, and then flex options, although the next support is going to be either Chevris as the premier overload support, who's excellent both at C0 and even better at C6, or Bennett if you don't have her available. Once you have that, the last slot can be quite literally almost any Pyro or Electro DPS. Any of the Electro carries you can think of that can be played in a overload team can be used here, and the same can be said about any of the Pyro carries that can be played as well. So I'll save my breath of naming every single one of them, but for those of you who want to play any Pyro carry, right? I'm using Arlecchino as an example here. Well, you can slot them into a very simple overload Durin team, and he will be an excellent off-field Pyro applier, who also deals good damage. Now, for a bit more information, firstly, in a Veresa team, while Fischl still works, Jansan can work as well, and a constellated Jansan can potentially be better, so I did want to mention that. And also, if you don't have Chevris, feel free to use Bennett as a viable alternative. Outside of that, for some specific synergies I wanted to mention, firstly, the Hex an excellent off-field Pyro applier, who also deals good damage. Now, for a bit more information, firstly, in a Veresa team, while Fischl still works, Jansan can work as well, and a constellated Jansan can potentially be better, so I did want to mention that. And also, if you don't have Chevris, feel free to use Bennett as a viable alternative. Outside of that, for some specific synergies I wanted to mention, firstly, the Hexarai carries here that can be played in an overload team, so namely Klee and Razor, can really appreciate having Durin in their team and can be played in the carry slot of the team I showed you guys earlier, slotting Klee into the Chevris Fischl Durin team, or Razor into a similar team but with a C6 Bennett instead of Chevris to give him some Pyro normal attacks on top of his Electro for a ton of reactions. Outside of that, Sethos can also be played in an overload team, but also one that has both burning and overload, running a Sethos having Durin in their team and can be, so I did want to mention that. And also, if you don't have Chevris, feel free to use Bennett as a off-field Pyro applier, who also deals good damage. Now, for a bit more information, firstly, in a Veresa team, while Fischl still works, Jansan can work as well, and a constellated Jansan can potentially be better, so I did want to mention that. And also, if you don't have Chevris, feel free to use Bennett as a viable alternative. Outside of that, for some specific synergies I wanted to mention, firstly, the Hexarai carries here that can be played in an overload team, so namely Klee and Razor, can really appreciate having Durin in their team and can be played in the carry slot of the team I showed you guys earlier, slotting Klee into the Chevris Fischl Durin team, or Razor into a similar team but with a C6 Bennett instead of Chevris to give him some Pyro normal attacks on top of his Electro for a ton of reactions. Outside of that, Sethos can also be played in an overload team, but also one that has both burning and overload, running a Dendro character as well. And Linny's just here because I feel like he doesn't get a lot of love, so I wanted to mention him as one of the viable Pyro carries, but I could say the same about characters like Yoimiya, Yanfei, Arlecchino, Hu Tao, or literally any, and the same can be said with the Electros as well. For example, characters like Razor, Clorind, Veresa, Raiden, Sino, Sethos, Kaching, or just anyone who could be on field like a Catalyst character, all can work as an on-field option in these overload teams. It really is pretty universal. So yeah, overload Durin teams are great, as Durin is not only a support, but also an off-field kind of carry or sub-DPS in these teams as well. Moving on, you can play him with a Nemo carry, so he works really well with the newly buffed Venti, getting the Hexarai Resonance, and yeah, Venti can be a carry now. He also works with other Nemo carries like Shao or Wanderer, or virtually any single Nemo carry as a form of off-field Pyro app, and also a Nemo Res Shred. He also works well in a Chaska team, which have performed surprisingly well. Honestly, I really do like teams like this for Chaska, running Durin, and then there's a lot of other options. Durin Fischl with a flex slot works. There's a double Electro team with Fischl and Jansan. You can even run a Hydro character here like Mona, other Electros like Inefa, or Cryos like Sitlali, or even a Scofier alongside Mona. Outside of that, Durin works well as the Pyro applier in a Kniech team. Once again, as with everyone else, Durin Fischl with a flex slot works. There's a double Electro team with Fischl and Jansan. You can even run a Hydro character here like Mona, other Electros like Inefa, or Cryos like Sitlali, or even a Scofier alongside Mona. Outside of that, Durin works well as the Pyro applier in a Kniech team. Once again, as with everyone else, the exact slots are flexible, but Durin works with Albedo for the Hexarai Resonance, but you don't need it, and you can also run Emily or just any flex slot you have available, with Emily and Albedo being my favorites. And then the last slot should be a buffer like Jansan or Bennett. Durin is a great Pyro option for a Kniech team, and outside of that, you can also run him alongside Geo carries like Navia, Ito, Noel, or others. Once again, he's just a generic Pyro off-fielder here. Ito teams will oftentimes have a triple Geo core with Goro and another Geo such as Albedo, and Navia teams run one other Geo like Albedo if you have him, but Shilonin or Chiori can work too. The last slot is going to be flex option, with Bennett being your go-to buffer. Durin also works in a Flint's team as a viable last slot alongside your best Electro and Hydro. Do note that in this team you can run Ino Inefa, but you can also replace Ino with a Mona, who who can just barely give you enough hydro application if played properly and with enough energy recharge to help enable your reactions. In a team like this, you should be able to get lunar charges for your Flins and also some vaporizes and overloads for your Durin as well. Do note that while if you don't have Inefa, you can use Fischl, you will not have a healer this way, so you'll have to run a healer in one slot or prototype Amber on someone if you have a catalyst. All of this is covered more in my Flynn's guide, but yeah, Durin works here as a flex option. You can also play Durin as an off-field pyro in a Moalani team, and this one is quite flexible. You could do Albedo Durin to get Albedo's new buffs for Moalani, or you could do Mona, especially with constellations, and Durin to give her buffs. You can also run Sucrose to get her buffs, and the last slot is flexible. Shilinen works as a form of res shred, as he will be in dark mode and can't shred hydro resistance anyways, while also being a healer if you need a panic button. Through the early math that has been done, it does seem like Moalani's kind of quote-unquote best team is going to look like Moalani, Mona, Sucrose, and then a pyro option, with Mawika being the strongest here because you already have the witch resonance from Sucrose and Mona, but your only healer here is like a prototype Amber Mona, and so if you want to change that up or want to run Durin, you can do Durin Mona and then Shilinen as your healer, or this team that I'm showing you. There's really a lot of flex options. Maybe I'm covering this too much, but yeah, Durin works here as off-field pyro, and he'll enable the Hexarai resonance for another support like Albedo or Mona. Durin also works with on-field hydros, like most notably Neuvillette. You can run Neuvillette in a standard carry team with Durin as a great off-field option, who can be in dark mode vaporizing. I also want to mention that in the teams where I didn't mention, it also works with on-field hydros, like most notably Neuvillette. You can run Neuvillette in a standard carry team with Durin as a great off-field option, who can be in dark mode vaporizing. I also want to mention that in the teams where I didn't mention dark or white mode, who can, like most notably Neuvillette, for another support like Albedo or Mona. Durin also works with on-field hydros, like most notably Neuvillette. You can run Neuvillette in a standard carry team with Durin as a great off-field option, who can be in dark mode vaporizing. I also want to mention that in the teams where I didn't mention as a great off-field option, who can be in dark mode vaporizing. I also want to mention that in the teams where I didn't mention as a great off-field hydros, like most notably Neuvillette. You can run Neuvillette in a standard carry team with Durin as a great off-field option, who can be in dark mode vaporizing. I also want to mention that in the teams where I didn't mention great off-field option, who can be in dark mode vaporizing. I also want to mention that in the teams where I didn't mention dark or white mode, he's going to be in white mode. Like all of these other teams, he's typically just in white mode, and you don't have to worry too much about it. In a Neuvillette team, he's obviously paired with flex options, whatever the best supports are for your Neuvillette, and he can vaporize. A great team I really enjoyed as well is Burgeon in a Neuvillette team, most notably in AoE, if you have Neuvillette and Lauma available. With that said, Durin can also be played in generic Burgeon teams, running him with a fast hydro plier and whatever your best dendro option is. Obviously, Lauma works amazing, but if you don't have her, a generic dendro slot can work, and the last slot is flexible. I just use Fischl for great damage and the Hexarai resonance. Do note though that if you are playing a Burgeon team like the Neuvillette one or this one here, your Durin actually wants to be in white mode in order to get the rest shred, and he should be built on full elemental mastery. In the do note though that if you are playing a Burgeon team like the Neuvillette one or this one here, you have Neuvillette and Lauma available. With that said, Durin can also flex options, whatever the best supports are for your Neuvillette, and he can vaporize. A great team I really enjoyed as well is Burgeon in a Neuvillette team, most notably in AoE, if you have Neuvillette and Lauma available. With that said, Durin can also be played in generic Burgeon teams, running him with a fast hydro plier and whatever your best dendro option is. Obviously, Lauma works amazing, but if you don't have her, a generic dendro slot can work, and the last slot is flexible. I just use Fischl for great damage and the Hexarai resonance. Do note though that if you are playing a Burgeon team like the Neuvillette one or this one here, your Durin actually wants to be in white mode in order to get the rest shred, and he should be built on full elemental mastery. In the other Neuvillette teams, if you're wondering, he will be in dark mode, but yeah, in Burgeon, you should put him on white mode. Outside of that, other hydro appliers, generic on-fielders can work for Durin, with Mona being the most notable and best synergy, who got a lot of buffs with the Hexarai resonance, being able to extend her Omen's duration, increase a lot of your damage, be played as an on-fielder, but also an off-fielder, just do 4 normal attacks before swapping, and she's one who gets notably better with her new C1, C2, and then even C4. Outside of that, for some main DPS Durin teams, where you're actually playing him on field, these will feature C6 Bennett to make his normal and charge attacks pyro. You can play Overvape with Farina, allowing you to run the Marechaussee Hunter set, and in my testing, I got a good uptime on my vaporizes, but sometimes it messed up, so if you want faster hydro, you can do that, and you can even run Singcho here as a 4-star option who works great. You can also run Durin as a DPS in an overload team, where he can be an off-field DPS, like that's normally what's gonna happen when paired with another carry, but if you want to on-field him, you can run Bennett here, and this works as well. And Durin will obviously be on white mode in this team. Outside of that, you can run Durin alongside Farina and Mona, and use Mona to apply some extra hydro, and Durin in dark mode to do all of the damage. Outside of that, Durin can also be played in melt teams, although note that in these teams, who's melting will depend on which form your Durin's in and also how fast your cryo and pyro application is. As a DPS dark mode Durin, you can run a fast cryo applier and enable your Durin in his dark mode to get melts on his burst and increase his personal damage that way, whereas Durin can also be played in the white mode in these teams, and while he won't offer you cryo res shred, so he won't be as insane as a support, he still will give you good and faster pyro application with good uptime and good damage that will enable another crowd character you're running to get melts themselves, so he can be a viable option in both forms. Also, while I still have some Yehoda testing to do as she just came out, Durin is a viable support in her teams as well, where provided you have Ascended Gleam, when paired with a support like Inefa or Rhino, Yehoda can get some elemental infused damage, and Durin paired with potentially another Hexerai unit can be nice supports and damage dealers there. And so yeah, as you can see, Durin has a ton of different teams where he works, a ton of different playstyles, and someone who I think is going to be most popular as a white mode off-field burst support and sub DPS, but also a powerful dark mode off-field damage dealer as well. Someone who has great pyro application and who's honestly usable in so many different teams as a great off-field pyro option. I'm very happy with his versatility and the flexibility in his teams. Regarding a showcase, I did a full video showing him off previously, so if you want to see more teams in action, do check that out, but I've made sure to include a bunch of different footage in this video as well for my C0 Durin on the live server. With that said, I'm not going to include another extra showcase section because this video is already getting really long and I did another video on it in case you are interested. With that said, thank you for your無事今日の
気をつけて。
風が立つぞ。よっ。よっ。全弾発射。風が立つぞ。
断罪の
危ない。物語は始まったわ。
お披露目だ。
飛ぶか。今だ。ロックオン。
腐食神聖。
今だ。
The companies are post-consumer. They do not need you right now. Private equity and these large companies want to make sure that you not only rent your home and lease your car, but subscribe to your computer. Data center and AI greed has gone beyond simply fucking consumers and instead is now intent on fucking humanity. With things like the Palantir partnership, with things like the focus on military applications of AI, because apparently there's not enough money in the private sector, we need to go extract it from the Pentagon as well. These large companies can outbid anybody anytime. This isn't a gaming computer problem. This isn't a DIY enthusiast build PCs problem. This is an everybody problem. NVIDIA's in the news for rumors we've corroborated with industry sources that it intends to cut consumer GeForce GPU production by 30 to 40% next year, yielding to enterprise GPU sales. And as usual, it's the normal people who get economically fucked while these mega corporations get into bed with each other and with governments to leach the market dry and sequester away computing power into the cloud so that they can lease it back to you later. And this comes at a time when costs are going up for NVIDIA's GPU subscription program, ensuring that you'll pay for a new flagship GPU every 5 years, whether you actually get to own it or not at the end of that. We think the mega corporations and private equity are slowly pushing for computers to go the way of the housing market, with the end goal being that you'll own nothing and you'll subscribe to everything, right down to your computer. NVIDIA sold 600,000 GPUs to Saudi Arabia's Humane, led by Mohammed bin Salman, and part of the same PIF group that partnered with Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner to buy EA Games. 60,000 NVIDIA GPUs went to the UAE via Microsoft, and NVIDIA is planning to allocate 1.3 million GPUs to Meta AI for a data center large enough to cover most of Manhattan. Then there's 300,000 GPUs to Nscale, with 60,000 in the UK, 50,000 GPUs to SK Hynix, 50,000 GPUs to Samsung, 200,000 GPUs to Elon Musk's xAI, with a roadmap to sell them 1 million total GPUs, 400,000 GPUs to Oracle, 10 gigawatts of NVIDIA systems for OpenAI, or over 2 times the power capacity of the largest nuclear power plant in the United States, with millions of GPUs, more than 100,000 GPUs in the immediate future for Microsoft, and even 100,000 GPUs to the United States Department of Energy. The last one, of course, funded by taxpayers, will ultimately foot the bill for the cost of the GPUs, the cost of the power consumption, the cost of the grid upfit, and the cost of the land use, getting fucked over in ways more than just the cost of the computer. So with these deals between governments and companies, it's pretty clear that NVIDIA would rather sell over 1 million GPUs to Mark Zuckerberg rather than 1 million GPUs to 1 million end users. And that's not a surprise, but what is interesting is that NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has seemingly shifted his interest towards the military-industrial complex instead, meaning that he's removed his hand out of the ass of the White House and extended it to shake the hand of the Pentagon.
Well, I'm happy that our military is going to use AI technology for defense.
We also know that national security and economic security and economic prosperity go hand in hand. The wealthier our nation, the more we can fund the mightiest military on the planet, so that we can continue to be the mightiest technology industry in the world, so that we can fund the mightiest military in the world. And all of that, I think, goes hand in hand.
I'm happy that we're making it more socially acceptable. You know, there was a time where when somebody wanted to channel their technology capability and their intellect into defense technology, somehow they're vilified.
That's right. Vilified somehow. For some reason, the people who design AI system usage for killing people are vilified.
Come with me if you want to live.
And if you want to learn more about that particular topic, you can check out our latest GNCA video that is on the Palantir and NVIDIA relationship, which is shady in a number of other ways. When he's not busy with his latest multiplayer affair with the Warhawks, Jensen Huang is busy testing the theory of the inverse Kramer and driving number up for Wall Street. Roll 212.
I always like it when we give a keynote, everybody's stock price goes up.
Stargate will consume 40% of the global DRAM supply. NVIDIA is set to consume 77% of the AI wafer allocation. NVIDIA's 2027 HBM bit demand is projected to consume more than the entirety of the 2025 HBM demand. And the wafer area, factoring in lower yield of HBM plus allocation to interposer wafers, will further squeeze users of consumer devices. NVIDIA's close partner Micron has abandoned consumers while raking in billions of dollars from those same consumers via tax breaks and government subsidies, boasting a 257% growth in cloud-based memory revenue from hyperscalers and from NVIDIA, while also increasing its operating margin in its mobile and client business to 47% from 15% year over year in fiscal quarter 1, 2026. Because they weren't making enough on you already, so they've altered the deal. Pray that they don't alter it further. And so AI bus driver Jensen Huang can cooperate with memory manufacturers like Micron to further crush the end user underfoot and line the pockets of the trillionaire tech companies and the billionaire tech CEOs. All at a time when the average person has seen a wage growth increase in November of 0.1% and an annual wage growth increase of 3.5%, only 0.5 percentage points outpacing inflation, stacked with the highest unemployment rate in 4 years. But it's not all bad. Gaming companies are saying they might have to optimize their video games more than they wanted to account for the memory pricing. So, good. That's good. We'll still have video games to play while the world is plunged into a dystopic AI surveillance darkness, the likes of which we've never seen before, but Larian's gonna optimize their next game more than they wanted to. It's time to talk about what's going on with the memory industry and NVIDIA, and this time, the what that we want to uncover specifically is the fuck. We brought you this installment to our AI Dystopia series of video coverage as part of our Kickstarter-style AI Dystopia series support campaign on store.gamersaccess.net. The series focuses on global surveillance, tech company overreach, and anti-consumer behavior. As part of the support campaign, you can get signed versions of our GN15 mouse mats for one of the tiers, the new redacted GN logo glassware with a nucleation base for our Dystopia smiley, themed around our Vaporwave smiley t-shirt, a new sticker pack with a throwback to all of a few months ago when we got Bloomberged for our latest investigative series, and even a copyright strike t-shirt. This is our latest Kickstarter-style fundraiser to help fuel our deep dive research and upcoming travel investigations. Alongside this series, we also launched our brand new 3D rubberized coaster packs with a retro I/O design, included an old school PC case front panel with 5 1/4 bays, retro colorway controller, and more. We just read it and card and to support the price situation, our of AI Dystopia coverage. Let's get back into it. The GPU price situation and the memory price situation are directly tied to each other. Where right now, the GPU prices have been improving for completed cards, but each GPU has memory attached to it. And the memory prices, as you all know, have been skyrocketing, where in fact, if you bought memory back in August or late July and you sold it today, it is possibly the best investment you have ever made in your life. That's how fast it's multiplied. The big if you bought memory back in August or late July and you sold it today, it is possibly the best investment you have ever made in your life. That's how fast it's multiplied. Possibly the best back in August, and the memory prices, as you all know, have been skyrocketing, where in fact, if you bought memory back in August or late July and you sold it today, it is possibly the best investment you have ever made in July and you sold skyrocketing, where in fact, if you bought memory back in August or late July and you sold it today, it is possibly the best investment you have ever made in your life. That's how fast it's multiplied. The big three memory makers, meanwhile, are all increasing HBM production for GPUs. Likewise, servers have their own need for RAM, and it's measured in hundreds of gigabytes to terabytes. For some context, GN spoke with a respected industry insider and analyst who actually is familiar to the audience, but we can't name the person because of their association with some of these companies, and the individual told us this. Quote, the capacity for regular DDR memory, a big chunk of that has been allocated to HBM or has been allocated to server-oriented applications. For instance, if you look at Grace Blackwell, the host CPU needs a giant pile of LPDDR. That LPDDR is no longer available for other markets, like the mobile market. That mostly inflates prices. This is going to fuck Intel. For Intel and AMD specifically, it's very good that memory is cheap, end quote. Now, whether or not the rumor that was posted online in the past week is specifically true down to the individual percentage points, we did speak with some system integrators and some add-in board partners, or AIBs, sometimes called AICs, to try and corroborate the information. And what we did learn is that the companies are forecasting cost increases associated with obtaining video cards and GPUs in 2026, with some vendors noting that they've been informed of reduced supply availability of NVIDIA GeForce GPUs for the next year, lining up with the rumors that have been posted online, with the exception of the specific percentage change for GPU availability and the reduction in supply. The latest news comes from Chinese board partner forum Bantang, which was reported on by BenchLife, and the report states that NVIDIA will cut supply of GeForce GPUs by 30 to 40% in the first half of 2026. The report refers to memory shortages, with the rumor indicating that NVIDIA is attempting to adjust production of GeForce GPUs to account for memory shortages. The report suggests that this isn't about only GPU VRAM, but also about the shortage of consumer sticks of RAM used in retail motherboards. According to BenchLife, cutting GPU supply will adjust for the lack of affordable consumer system memory, which will create a feedback loop, boosting the prices of both. And again, regardless of that specific rumor that was posted online, in speaking with, after that, our own system integrator and add-in board partners, it sounds like there's at least truth to the premise that GPU supply might potentially see more constraints in 2026, which can drive up prices, largely attached to the memory situation because all of the video cards have memory on them. Benchlife.info received its own tips as well from add-in board partners, stating that NVIDIA's prioritization will be toward the 5070 Ti and the 5060 Ti 16GB GPUs. This follows rumors about a month ago that NVIDIA would stop bundling GPU VRAM with GPU silicon, meaning that partners would be on their own to source memory supply. Partners won't have as much quantity leverage as NVIDIA, which can lead to another feedback loop of increased prices, particularly for smaller board partners and smaller laptop partners that would struggle to get not only competitive pricing, but access as compared to the largest incumbents like Asus and NVIDIA itself for its FE cards, since it has bulk pricing benefits for its enterprise cards too. All of this can contributes to a stall in consumer GPU pricing recovery. We ran a piece 2 weeks ago entitled GPU Prices Crater Before Inevitable Opportunity to Screw Consumers. And today I present to you, not proudly, Inevitable Opportunity to Screw Consumers. In that piece, we showed that for the first time this year, GPU prices had finally hit a downward trend for consumers. This was just as the DRAM shortage ramped to hit consumers the hardest. GPU MSRP is still elevated above what's reasonable overall, but cards other than the RTX 5090, which stands alone in its class, have come down in price over the course of the year. Our data for late November showed that in-stock listings at MSRP for GPU models had increased substantially from 13 in June to 58 in late November. For all listings in stock, we saw an increase from 135 to 171 models on Newegg. Strictly for in-stock average price listings, we also previously aggregated data that showed a drawdown in GPU pricing, with the 9070 XT falling from $837 to $655 on average, the 5070 Ti falling from $951 to $821, the B580 falling from $343 to $264, 35 to 171 models on Newegg. Strictly for in-stock average price listings, we also previously aggregated data that showed a drawdown in GPU pricing, with the 9070 XT falling from $837 to $655 on average, the 5070 Ti falling from $951 to $821, the B580 falling from $343 to $264, and the RTX 5080 falling from $1,514 to $1,359. The only card in this table that went up on average was the one with the most VRAM and the one that has the least competitors, which is 0, and that's the RTX 5090. The 5090 is not only uncontested, but it's useful in AI, and it also is strapped with the highest VRAM capacity out of all these cards, which means it'll be the most immediately sensitive to memory pricing changes. That GPU's price increased from $3,049 to $3,102 on average against a $2,000 MSRP advertised. Our charts from that piece also looked at the cheapest 4 in-stock models per GPU variation, then plotted the data for price over MSRP on average. Most cards were slightly below or were at MSRP for their cheapest 4 in stock, with the 5080 and 5090 above, with the 5090's 4 cheapest in stock models averaging $1,103 over MSRP, or an increase of about 55%. That's data that we pulled only a few weeks ago, and now looking at what our own sources at SIs and AIB partners are saying, plus Benchlife's, plus the Bobantan forum sources, it looks like NVIDIA could be cutting GPU supply just in time to kneecap the consumer price downtrend and benefit for consumers and keep it elevated for pricing. This allows NVIDIA to shift its focus and keep supply of both memory and GPU silicon in the enterprise and data center world, and now in the military industrial complex, per Jensen Huang's new and disturbing obsession with AI applications for the military, which again for some reason are vilified, nobody knows why. Looking at PC part picker price trends, the bearer of the highest memory capacity, the RTX 5090, has actually started already to see price creep upwards again in just the last 2 weeks. The rest of the cards, fortunately, are still showing that slow downward trend, but we don't know if that's going to continue. Data center GPUs largely run on HBM, or high bandwidth memory, but the cost of a lot of different types of memory are directly tied to GPU utilization of its own memory supply, both HBM and not. That includes DRAM pricing for DRAM that you'd put in a motherboard as being directly tied to GPU utilization of memory supply. Completed video cards and GPUs cost not only the wafer area to make the graphics processor itself, but also the wafer area to make associated silicon components. That include VRAM, like HBM or GDDR memory, but also silicon often derived from TSMC wafers used to make interposers that HBM tends to sit on top of. Every GPU sold has memory attached to it. For now. I mean, they'd like to sell you a 0 gigabyte RTX 6060 Ti, but for now, they all have memory. Just for GPUs alone, a reported Morgan Stanley analysis posted on Twitter from February of this year suggested that NVIDIA would consume 77% of AI wafer allocation. The total AI wafer consumption was valued at up to $14.5 billion. NVIDIA's consumption increased from 51% in the prior year, with AMD, AWS, and Google declining in the 2025 estimate. NVIDIA is also now one of the largest consumers of memory supply just in general.
We work with every single memory vendor now. We have 3 different sources, 3 gigantic sources of really complicated memory.
The GPUs you're looking at right now use HBM, or high bandwidth memory. HBM has been used on consumer cards in the past sparingly, mostly in failures by AMD, but these days it's most commonly found on data center GPUs. The name gives away its higher bandwidth benefit. The value of HBM is obvious for tasks that are memory intensive, and particularly that are bandwidth intensive, like training for AI tasks. Memory is made using silicon wafers, just like the ones we saw in Intel's fab for its CPUs previously. previously. Wafer supply is limited, largely due to the amount of machines available to actually process those wafers, and now that is more true than ever that OpenAI has claimed 40% of the world's entire memory supply for itself. As for what they'll use that supply for, other than further consolidating power and memory supply into data centers to then lease it back to you in some capacity, we assume that it'll be to power ChatGPT's erotica fan nonfiction, where all the corporate tech CEOs form a giant circle around consumers for their annual circle. Because wafers, or more specifically, wafer processing capabilities are finite, the wafer allocation for business enterprise is shared with the wafer allocation for consumer. They are one and the same before they get processed into something. But it's worse than just the fact that this is all shared with a group that can outbid you. Data centers typically use GPUs that utilize HBM, which can require more wafer area when considering all factors for the memory produced than with GDDR7. Now that is specifically factoring in things like yield losses. Gartner HBM forecast report author Shrish Pant, in an interview with Tech Target, provided context on HBM's die area cost. Quote, "You will need a much bigger die to produce a similar gigabyte of HBM chip," end quote. Citing Pant, the publication wrote, quote, "The larger die is needed due to the process of through silicon via," end quote, manufacturing, we'd assume. Citing Jim Handy, the general director and semiconductor analyst at Objective Analysis, Tech Target quoted Handy as saying, quote, "The wafer costs more and it produces less than half to have as many chips," end quote, comparing that to non-HBM solutions. Speaking to some of our own sources in technical analysis, we learned that you would need around 2.3 to 3x the DRAM die area for X gigabits of HBM as compared to something like GDDR7, where X is just whatever the capacity is. You would also need a base logic die and an interposer for HBM, so there's additional silicon wafer cost beyond the die area for the DRAM. OpenAI's wafer use would consume 900,000 wafer starts per month by 2029, spread across Samsung and Hynix, which would equal about double the current global monthly HBM production, according to a statement from SK Group chairman Che Tae-wan, quoted by Reuters. SK Group here, of course, being related to SK Hynix. Now, we also know experts in the industry, so we went to speak with some of our own sources to just try and cross-verify this information that was in these various reports. The SK Hynix stuff, probably pretty damn good information. They are the direct supplier. Some of these other quotes, though, they come from third-party external analysts. It's quoted by another publication. They've stripped the quotation directly and they've paraphrased it. So we did some of our own research and speaking with a mix of people at GPU manufacturers and external third-party analysts. Can't name any of them because their association with these companies and what we're saying in this report. But we found some conflicting information on the specific die area cost and wafer area cost of HBM. But we did find a general consensus that for total wafer area allocation and cost, factoring in all associated wafer cost needs to make HBM products, that should generally be higher than, or higher wafer supply and machine time consumption than GDDR7, for example. And so one of our contacts informed us that, actually two of them, informed us that the bit cell area cost should be similar between HBM and GDDR in terms of area cost, but noted that the increased losses from yields, largely due to complicated stacking, and some potentially higher I/O area cost, per bit, that is, and the need for a base die with HBM contributes to that increased wafer area cost for HBM versus something like consumer GDDR7 memory. One analyst who wished not to be named because he performs work with these companies told us, quote, "HBM is significantly more costly in every sense of the word than GDDR. And that's why GDDR is used in client systems. HBM has lower power, it's more reliable, it's better for ECC, there's a lot to like, except for the cost," end quote. Not all silicon components of HBM come from the memory foundry wafer supply either. Some of that will come from other vendors, like potentially TSMC, for the interposer that everything sits on top of. We asked the analyst about interposer costs, and the insider noted to us that the cost to make the interposers isn't as high as something as advanced as a GPU, maybe obviously, but still consumes wafer supply. Quote, "Consumer DRAM is designed to be as cheap as possible, but HBM not so much. As for the interposers, they're going to be from TSMC. The input wafer is probably the same. The input wafer might be $50 to $100 maybe. The expensive part is EUV, or extreme ultraviolet lithography. Do you use EUV to make GPUs? Sure do. Do you use EUV to make interposers? Abso-fucking-lutely not," end quote. That's my kind of quote. Like all manufacturing, wafers have a certain percent yield, or the amount of good products that are yielded out of the input supply, which is the wafer. And so going through the entire fab process, some of the yield losses are due to natural manufacturing issues. You might have things like cross-contamination of metals. Maybe copper got in where it's not supposed to and sort of poisoned it. Could be oxidation, could be patterning issues, and so on. We talk about these in our Intel Fab Tour video in depth if you want to learn more. And in particular, larger die area products like data center GPUs with massive dies, or things with HBM, which are just more complex to make, they have a higher chance of a failure due to too many things going wrong somewhere in the chip where it just fails. Now, some of this can be salvaged as a down-bin part. You see this in consumer all the time, but that's kind of a different topic. TechTarget's article also cited IDC analyst Jeff Janakovich, who stated, quote, HBM will have several packages. So if I have yield loss at the DRAM level, then a little bit of yield loss at the packaging level, rather than throwing away one chip, I could be throwing away 4, end quote. Industry analyst firm TrendForce, which tracks memory prices, published a report in 2024 that indicated HBM, quote, not only boosts bit demand, but also raises the industry's average price, end quote. TrendForce more recently ran a report just a couple months ago that noted all 3 major memory suppliers will be making HBM4 in 2026. The firm published a chart showing the distribution of bit consumption. Bits are the unit of measurement for memory supply, with that chart being overwhelmingly assigned to NVIDIA. The inner circle shows the 2025 supply being split between NVIDIA, AMD, and ASICs, or task-specific dedicated processing devices. In 2026, TrendForce is projecting an increase in ASIC consumption of HBM bit demand, but still high NVIDIA demand. Back to TechTarget's report, analyst Jim Handy was credited with citing NVIDIA and other hyperscalers as driving HBM bit demand. Semi-Analysis said this of HBM, quote, despite the rapid rise of custom ASICs, NVIDIA will still command the lion's share of HBM demand in 2027, driven by its aggressive roadmap where Rubin Ultra alone pushes per GPU capacity to 1 terabyte, end quote. This semi-analysis chart also suggests that HBM bit demand for NVIDIA in 2027 is projected to exceed literally the entirety of all HBM bit demand by all companies in 2025. That memory supply is going to come from somewhere, and it's mostly going to be from you. We're going to make some assumptions here to make a point just with something. There are assumptions in this, just to be clear about that. We're doing the physics thing. We are assuming a spherical cow for our math here. If we assume, I mean, it's really no different than Jensen Huang's CEO math that he does on stage. All right, if we assume a memory wafer supply constraint rather than a GPU wafer supply constraint, and if we assume a like-for-like GPU memory type, such as just GDDR7, no other HBM considerations here, at an identical density per chip. All right, there's a lot of assumptions. I'll walk through why some of these don't work this way, but we assume all that stuff. A 96 gigabyte GPU with GDDR7, for example, that is intended for business enterprise usage would be produced at a rate of 1 to 6 16 gigabyte consumer GPUs, ignoring the GPU itself. The GPU itself also consumes less die area, yields better, you can make a lot more of those. But in other words, for every 6 cards worth of 16 gigabyte GPUs by memory capacity alone, assuming the same type of memory and the same density, you would get one 96 gigabyte GPU with those like for likes. Now, in reality, it's not that easy, of course. The GPU, pretty big thing to ignore. In this case, though, ignoring it actually only really benefits the math or business enterprise. But also, the density is typically not the same. The RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell, for instance, that we took apart, uses 32 memory modules at a density of 3 gigabytes each, whereas the 5060 Ti Prime OCE Torrent